The 1970s was a revolutionary decade in all senses of the word. Political beliefs were shaken by the Vietnam War and Watergate scandals. Music and fashion reflected departure from mainstream society, and America as a whole left tradition for new ideas and values. The importance of the individual was emphasized throughout this decade, resulting in a large counterculture that despised most large and powerful organizations, including the government. Before getting into specific events of the 70s and the radical culture that defines the decade, it is important to first examine the causes of the sudden anti-government wave that overtook America. Official American involvement in the Vietnam War began in 1964 under President Johnson, drafting almost 2 million soldiers before 1973. The American public was outraged over the government's seemingly unnecessary intervention in Vietnam, and over 75% of Americans reportedly disagree with U.S. proceedings in the war. America finally withdrew forces from Vietnam in 1973 with the signing of the Paris Peace Accords. The Vietnam War was a major cause in swaying public opinion away from the government's favor, and more importantly, sparked non-traditional ways of thinking.
In combination with Vietnam, the Watergate scandal of 1972 involving the Nixon administration intensified the public's lack of confidence in the government. The Watergate scandal was a pivotal event of the decade that resulted in the only presidential resignation in United States history. Nixon was elected president in 1968 and re-elected in 1972. However, he would never finish his second term in office due to the publicized scandal that occurred shortly before his re-election. The infamous Watergate burglars were discovered attempting to bug the Democratic National Committee offices in the Watergate Hotel in Washington, D.C. This incident brought forward many pieces of evidence that led to the FBI's discovery that the break-in was actually part of a massive Republican-headed operation to sabotage the Democratic Party during Nixon's re-election campaign. However, Nixon still managed to win the 1972 presidential election by one of the largest majorities the country has ever seen, mainly because the extent of his involvement in the scandal had not yet been revealed. Nixon's impeachment trial was nationally televised and became a media firestorm through 73 and 74. With the discovery of Nixon's office and telephone tapings, the House Judiciary Committee passed the first of 3 articles of impeachment, and Nixon resigned less than 2 weeks afterwards. Nixon himself was pardoned of his crimes by his successor, President Ford, but the damage done to national unity and confidence in America could not be reversed. The decreased patriotism of the 70s due to political events was also clearly seen in the culture of the decade. A large counterculture began to form, especially with the new generation. Everything from hairstyles and clothes to music and political views was revolutionized in the 70s. Fashion became centered on bell-bottoms, platform shoes, hot pants, and jumpsuits. Common hairstyles were determined by celebrities. The Farrah Fawcett style was quite notable, along with the afro and long locks as pictured in many TV shows of the time. In music, popular artists included The Beatles, Jackson 5, Fleetwood Mac, Simon and Garfunkel, Janis Joplin, The Temptations, Neil Diamond, Elton John, Stevie Wonder, Barbra Streisand, and the Bee Gees. Lots of music was written about desired social change during this decade. This theme was mirrored in the emerging environmental, women's, and gay rights movements. The first Earth Day was celebrated in 1970, and the government-funded Environmental Protection Agency was formed the same year. The women's equality movement gained momentum with the Equal Rights Act passing through Congress, even though it was never ratified by enough states to become a law. The numbers of women in the workforce continued to grow through the 1970s. With public displays like the Stonewall riots of '69, national awareness was also brought to the gay rights movement. Along with the rise of a more liberal population was the rise of drug use in America. Police reported dealings of drugs like marijuana and cocaine at unprecedented rates in the 70s. The Haight-Ashbury neighborhood in San Francisco was particularly known for the hippie subculture and popular drug use. Overall, the radical culture of the 70s was based in a newfound self-interest after faith in mainstream institutions like the government had failed people. Although the extremes of hippie culture did not influence the majority of Americans, it was clear that the attitude of relaxing and enjoying life took hold of the country during the 70s.
You know, life is like a train. It's bearing down on you, and guess what? It's gonna hit you. So you can either start running when it's far off in the distance, or you can pull up a chair, crack open a beer, and just watch it come. I did that once. No, Kelsey, not a real train. A metaphorical one. Like a ghost train? Yes. A ghost train.